Hello, Gospel Learning Center again. This is Wes coming to you from California. Uh, and today our topic is going to be why should you learn to speak English? First of all, one thing I want to share with you is that English is not the superior language. All it is, it's the more common language. I don't believe that God necessarily made more superior or more inferior languages. It's just at this time in history, at this time where the Lord is working with us, English has become the most common language in the world. And for that reason, many people are wanting and desiring to be able to learn English. It's probably one of the reasons why you right now are studying English, is that you see that with knowledge of how to speak English, there are more opportunities. Um, but I want to encourage you, as you're learning English, just know that the Lord doesn't consider English the more superior language. He's just using it as a tool to be able to communicate. Now, the question too, though, is why should you study English? And the number one reason is, like I said, is the fact that it is most common. Uh, During different times through history, there have been other languages that have been dominant in the world. If you look at when the Roman Empire was in place, they had the dominant language. If you look at the time of Constantine, he had the most dominant language. Different times in history, there have been other languages that have been the language of commerce and trade. But right now, we find ourselves in a time in history when English is that most dominant language spoken by most people. Which also, if you want to communicate with people, you've got to be able to speak a language. And wherever you go, typically in many places, you can find someone or people who speak English. Also, there are also certain jobs that require a knowledge of English. I remember as when I was in Venezuela in 2008 and 2009, that the air traffic controllers, all of that's done in English. Oftentimes in business, you'll find that in international business that a lot of different things are done in English, just because the major markets are done in English. You'll also find that many governmental terms are in English or described in English. And again, it's not that English is superior. It's just the language that the Lord used to describe certain things during this time. And if you have a knowledge of the English language, and if you have an understanding of it and an ability to communicate in that language, it will be able to open more doors for you in the future. But you may also be asking, what's the number one goal or reason for learning a language? I want you to think about it for a second. Why would I learn a different language? What's the number one reason? I'll give you a second to think about it. My own personal belief is that the number one reason that you learn a language is to be able to share Christ, is to be able to share the gospel in different places and to different people. If I'm going to learn another language, the number one reason why I need to think about learning that language is so that I can be able to share Christ with the nation that I'm going to. I studied some Spanish. I'm not fluent, but I am conversational. And when I go to Spanish-speaking countries, I want to be able to share Christ with those people. It's the most important thing. It's the number one thing. It's kind of like, why do you learn to read? The number one reason you should learn to read is to be able to read God's Word. And so why do we learn to speak different languages? the number one reason should be to be able to communicate the love of Christ with the people wherever you may be going. And so I want to encourage you as you're studying, as you're learning, as you're practicing your English. Remember, don't think of English as superior. Don't think of it Spanish is inferior, because they're not. I believe God gave languages to everyone. But think about the fact that your number one reason of why am I learning this is not necessarily for the job. It's not necessarily for the opportunity. But your number one reason to learn English is to be able to communicate the love of Christ with the people you're talking to. So I hope this video has been a blessing for you. Hope you have a wonderful day. And again, I will see you later.